wanted to tell us a little about the history of your home here and the construction and
Yes, it was built in 1921 by Elizabeth Gurnett, whose father had made a fortune in railroads, and she came here from California, though they were Eastern people, and she was married to a I he was an executive in, I'm not sure what, some kind of a company in Boston, I think. Her husband never lived here and really had nothing to do with the ranch. It was kind of her thing. And she came here originally, I believe, because her brother was a real estate dealer up in Wilcox and told her about this area and what a great place it would be for. She wanted kind of a combination orchard, farm, ranch, vineyard, everything, dairy. I don't know if I don't think she'd ever had any experience before, uh, or she might not have tried doing everything. But she did build here, and Alden describes the building in his book. I think they did hand make the adobes. They sun dried them in the forms and let them bake in the sun, and it was a tremendous number of blocks. But I'm so bad with figures, and I can't remember now if it was 6,000 blocks that they made for the house and the garage out there, or or more than that. But at any rate, it was a very high volume of baking the adobes, and so the house got built, and she she wanted her son Lincoln, who didn't want to do anything but run around to dances at rodeo and flirt with the girls, and her brother didn't turned out he didn't want to really do any serious back to the land kind of thing. So she really didn't have any dependable, uh, strong help
help?
with
Yeah.
the process. They did for a while. I have seen a brochure of the Sierra Linda Ranch, and it advertised things like the famed big game and lion hunters over in Paradise, the brothers over there who were very well known, for the Lee brothers, 4 or 5 of them. Nearly all of them meant disastrous ends. I know that one man had been in World War I, and when he came back, maybe it was World War II. When he came back, he was riding his horse over there in outside Paradise, a little way outside by Turkey Creek, and the horse hit a cave-in and fell on top of him. It killed the horse, and it pinned him under the horse, and he lay there all day, exposed to the sun and the weather, and he did die of internal injuries and exposure. And another one was accidentally shot on a lion hunt, and something else happened. Anyway, they had some pretty gruesome endings. But Mrs. Gurnett did advertise that you could go hunting with the famous Lee brothers, and and she had enough vaqueros kind of lounging around to make it look like a ranch, but she didn't really run very many cattle. She did have milking stock, milking for cream and milk, and had chickens. In fact, what is the guest house out there began life. It was either a turkey house or a chicken house. I don't know which. And the place down there, the Fagan place, which just sold, was originally either it was some kind of an outbuilding, and then was the garage, not the garage, the barn, because Alden Hayes used to shoe horses out there in front of it. There was a forge, and he shod horses down there when he was the son-in-law to this place. And so places around here have had many uses. The ones from Paradise, uh, what milled lumber there was, got brought over to Paradise to Rodeo or Portal and put back together again. So a lot of recycling went on because milled dressed lumber was kind of hard to come by. So but Mrs. Gurnett, did get her home built, and she built uh, the place down there where Sally Spofford lived for a while, and I was telling you the sad fate, but it was originally some kind of a chicken or turkey house, and was converted then into a 4-bedroom place. Actually, it's 2 apartments combined. So she had all this stuff, but no one to help her run it. So she got kind of fed up with it and turned it over to her English foreman, Neil Carr, who built a lily pond out here in back. And he, though, had a strong dislike of anyone with a dark skin. And he ran this as a guest ranch for a while after she left. Also a drying out place for people with alcohol problems. And he went over to Patagonia and got into a fight and was killed. So that took care of Neil. But his son John lives up in Wickenburg and has visited down here. He was a friend of Kim Murphy, our game warden, who brought him over. And John is an expert wood carver, and he never lived here though. His father was gone, and he didn't know the place. But a couple of interesting things happened in the wake of the Gurnetts. Now then, Mrs. Gurnett did sell to Alden Hayes's parents-in-law, Mr. Greenemeyer, Arthur Greenemeyer, had been a steel executive back east, but he had been a farm boy in either Iowa or Ohio, I forget which, and he dreamed of having a farm again, and he finally made enough money in industry to afford to be a farmer. So he bought this place in 41. He bought it in the spring. Alden married Gretchen, the Greenemeyer daughter, in the spring, and he was working on a dig in Texarkana when they met. And so Mr. Greenemeyer asked Alden if he would come back here and help him run this orchard, vineyard, farm, whatever you want to call it. So Alden and Gretchen decided they'd do that. Alden quit his archaeology job with the Park Service, and they came here, but Alden did learn how to milk a cow and how to brand and do some things like that. But came December 1941, and Alden was off to the wars and didn't come home until World War II was over. Gretchen spent the war years here with her mother and dad. They did not at that time have Eric and their other son, and so she was just here with her parents. There are pictures of her in the So What scrapbooks attending some of the So What meetings with her mother-in-law, Jane Greenemeyer, and doing other things around town. Beautiful woman, very, very beautiful. So Alden came back from the wars and helped here for a while, and then went over to bought the Desperation Ranch, and I told you how I went broke and went back to the Forest Service, so I won't go into that. But to return to Mrs. Gurnett's legacy, well, some years ago, oh yeah, well, to just trace the descent of the place, the Greenemeyers, when they passed on, neither Gretchen nor her brother could take over the place, so they agreed to sell it and split the money, and they did, and so the place did not stay in the Greenemeyer family. It went, an army surgeon who had known Finn after the Bataan Death March bought it, and he lived here in retirement. I have some photos of him and his grandchildren. I've met the grandchildren, and they lived here until he died, and then his widow sold the place to I guess she sold it back to Alden and Gretchen when he retired. So it's had a number of owners, but the Greenemeyers did sell off. It did have, Mrs. Gurnett bought up the old Portal home sites that had been platted. They thought it was going to be another boom city like Tombstone or the Comstock Lode or some fabulous mine, and that Portal would be the bedroom community and be very much in demand. So they platted all these sites, and they only sold 11, and they bought them. Powers, and his partner, and so she bought what was left of the Portal home sites and two other homesteads with what was here, and put this together because it was not extensive at that time. And so she had about 450 or more acres that spread out that way. It did not include Cave Creek Ranch. That was where the layers out of the plot, one went there and the other one went further up, went further up and had, I think, the Rose Mine or something farther up. Let's see, the McCord, there was, the McCord Trail is named for Powers's partner, who was also his father-in-law. So the McCord Trail going up the mountain was named for McCord, and then Powers had what is now Cave Creek Ranch. But the Greenemeyers sold off nearly everything out in front. They sold, no, before them, the doctor's widow had sold Hardy's, their site next door. And sharing the well. I have the deeds there and the stipulations on the well. And so she sold that to them. But apart from that, the Greenemeyers got rid of the rest of it. And so when we bought it from Alden, I think we had 6.5 acres, and we sold him an acre so he would have title to the road that goes back down to Cave Creek Ranch. That way, he owns the land on both sides by buying that acre, so no one can argue with him about his access rights. But this was years ago, but a woman, my sister was living in Douglas, and she had a friend whose niece came back for high school reunions every year, and it turned out that niece was Mrs. Gurnett's illegitimate grandchild by Larry, her son, and a nice little girl, only 15 or 16, when she came to be a maid here, who lived in my writing room, Carmen. What happened with Carmen? It's a sad story. It would make quite a good, quite a good book, actually. But Carmen's stepmother down in Douglas didn't want her at the house, and kind of, well, made things so uncomfortable that she looked for work elsewhere and heard about possible employment up here. And so she came up here to work as a maid for Mrs. Gurnett. Now, Mrs. Gurnett was not good, not kind to her employees. And she, one story they tell about her is uh, the ironing had to be perfect, and if there was the slightest wrinkle in a pillowcase or anything, she'd throw it back in the laundry and had it all to do over again. She was very demanding and strict. Carmen, there seems to be, he may have gone through a form of marriage with Carmen, and she apparently thought they were married, but he had a wife in California that he hadn't bothered to divorce. And so he, and I don't know where he was during the talk with Mrs. Gurnett, but Carmen went to her employer and said that she was pregnant with Larry's child. And Mrs. Gurnett said, "Oh, it could be any vaqueros." And she threw the girl out without a penny and nothing. I mean, nothing at all. And Carmen's brother, thank goodness, he quit high school and went to work and rented an apartment and kept Carmen and her baby there and took care of them. And Carmen got a job at the Gadsden Hotel working there, and she was, maybe 4 or 5 years old when she remembers. She told me this because she did turn up at my door, Carmen. And Carmen's daughter, Mickey, Angelina was her name, but Mickey's what everyone knew her as. So Carmen said to her daughter, "Get on your nicest dress and do your hair and put in a bow and look real pretty, because your dad is going to meet us down at the corner of G Avenue at about noon." So they went down there and stood on the corner and waited and waited and waited, and he never came. Which is cruel, really cruel.
Yeah.
So then after that, I don't know what got into Mrs. Gurnett, but she sent word to Carmen that she would like to see Angelina and see if she looked anything like Larry or any of the family. And Carmen replied that she hadn't wanted to see her when it might have done some good, and now no. And so Mrs. Gurnett never saw Mickey. But Mickey had, she told me, my sister's friend got us in touch, and I said, "Oh, of course, she must come out and I'll show her around." And so Mickey turned up, and she said that a number of times when she came back to a school reunion, she had come up here and had come to the gate, but had been afraid to come on up because she thought the Gurnetts might still be here and would be shove her away.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, they have been gone for years and years." But she was very a very pleasant, very interesting young woman, and not so young at that time. She was about my age, early 60s, and but she and her mom had this is an interesting history. They went out to California, and she married Mickey married a man, an Anglo, and Carmen married his brother. So they were related that way as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And so Carmen was happy and well taken care of out there, and Mickey had a happy marriage and children, and so that was good. Well, uh, several years after I met Mickey, and she would stop by when she was going past to Texas or going anywhere. So I saw her, oh, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times. But I looked out, and here came this file of big people up the gate. And I thought, who is this? And the guys were tall, and their wives were tall, and it was a pretty large battalion. And so they came up and said that they were Mrs. Gurnett's grandsons, and that they had never been back to the old homestead, and so they had to get together in Tucson. One of them lived in California, and the other was in the Tucson police force, and the other one I forget what he was doing, but they were all in either firefighting or police work. And so they said that they had thought they'd just drive down and come see. So I said, well, fine, and took them around, and they found it interesting. And I said, you know, we do have one of our Cochise County quarterlies has an issue on this teacher at Hilltop in 1924. And she used to visit your grandmother here and have breakfast in bed and have just a really good time. And and the teacher knew your father, who kind of flirted with her, but she didn't say very complimentary things about him. And they laughed and said, "Oh, we know all about Dad." And they weren't very tender. I mean, they seemed pretty good-natured about it. They didn't seem mad at him particularly, but they knew. And it turned out that what happened with him is that after he had abandoned little Carmen up here, he went down to Bisbee and got involved with the daughter of a Serbian miner who had 4 or 5 brothers, and they let him know that there was going to be a wedding or a shooting, and so there was a wedding. Now, he already still had this wife in California, but he married this girl, and so these guys were the offspring of that marriage. So, so they knew about Dad.
Yeah.
And he is buried in paradise, and so is Mrs. Gurnett and several of the rest of that family. But they were very pleasant, all of them, and I enjoyed them. And they went over to the cemetery and wanted to put up markers, better markers, where I think their grandmother didn't have a marker. I believe that her daughter snuck her into the grave with one of the Wilsons or Gannetts that already had a marker, so they never had a proper marker for her, and they were kind of wanting to do that, but I don't believe it ever quite happened. In fact, we seem to have lost touch through the years. But Mickey did go over there and found her dad's grave and was quite touched by it. And a lot of a lot of stories are buried over there.
Yeah,
I don't think any other people are going to appear out of the past like that.
yeah.
But it was interesting.
Do you have any, when you and your husband were here, do you have any fond memories or favorite times or interesting happenings during that
Well,
time?
we used to go. We had a little chug chug thing, small campers,
Yeah,
real small.
yeah.
Um, we used to take that and go up camping in the mountains, and uh, would read poetry to each other late at night.
Oh,
uh, and Bob was, as I say, a very good birder, and I I never was able to see the eye ring of anything, but it worked out well that he had his, and in addition to the birds, then after he and Renee got going on building up Portal Rescue and getting the buildings erected and starting the fire department and all that, that pretty took over. He
mm-hmm,
still birded, but not
mm-hmm,
as much as he had previously. He
mm-hmm,
really devoted
mm-hmm.
countless hours to that in the uh, his last years before he became a pretty disabled.
And that was building the building for the fire department, wasn't it? I mean, he had a lot to do with the building of the,
Well, he and Renee pretty much erected that bay, the first building, by themselves with very little help. The cement uh, the cement foundation had to be laid, and that had to be paid for out of. But there was a fund drive, and people have always been good to donate. But that first building was built for under $20,000.
mm-hmm,
But Renee and Bob did lots of the actual work, and Chuck Jensen, he either did the wiring for that. No, I think he did the wiring for the classroom. I'm
mm-hmm,
pretty sure that Chuck Jensen did all that extensive wiring for the soup kitchen
yeah,
plug-ins and all that
yeah,
stuff. But that was in the future, because when the bay was built, we didn't have a well yet. We
mm-hmm,
didn't have electricity. Uh, yeah, I guess we had some kind of electricity, but not much.
mm-hmm,
And because we did have that first soup kitchen in the bay and ran it off in electric skillets, the electric pots, so they had to be plugged into something. But we didn't have water there for a long time. I remember the first years of being an EMT, we'd go out and come in dirty and um, pretty messed up. No place to wash, no
mm-hmm,
place to clean up,
mm-hmm.
um, no place to go to the bathroom except out in the cactus. And uh, so it was very different to begin with. Um,
Do you
but
remember what year that was? Was it 70 somewhere?
no,
No?
it was later than that.
Oh,
It was, I think that building. When was that completed? 80, 87,
oh,
88. I know that Dennis McAvoy had his welder and his crane, and he did a lot of the heavy raising and
mhm,
building, and he did, I think, the wiring pretty much in that first building. He really did a lot of work there, and so they worked pretty hard on that thing and
yeah,
got it done. There is a plaque in front of it that gives the date it was dedicated. We had a dedication and a tree that the different EMTs and people put a ribbon on it denoting some particular thing that was going to be required or needed or
mhm,
was desirable. That was our house tree. And so we have photos of that, of the dedication day. And then the classroom then followed some years later. We first of all, though, did get the money to have a well, and that had to be dug, and of course that was more money. And I should say, and I'm sure you already have that, Mary and Bill Willie, Ralph Willie, donated the land for the Portal Rescue Complex there.
Yeah.
And it turned out that we needed enough room for a helicopter pad. And so then Mary, after Bill was dead, donated another stretch of land for the helicopter to land on.
Yeah.
So they did give that prime real estate
Yeah.
to the rescue. So that has been it has grown with the years, and the classroom was added, and which we were all very happy to have because it had bathrooms
And
it
it gets
had
a lot of
running
use.
water, but still not potable water. We can't.
Yeah.
We don't drink that water.
Yeah.
We carry our water down there to make tea or lemonade or whatever.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
No one drinks it. Yeah, that was a big step forward. And of course, it's where our community forums are held.
Yeah.
Many of it's the nearest thing we have to a town hall here
Exactly.
because the library is too small to hold more than, 30, 40 people. And then they're standing on each other's shoulders.
Yeah.
So the classroom has really been
Absolutely.
a well-used place. Everything from yoga classes to Firewise meetings to So What forums. It's used a lot.
It is.
And then the great big garage was added even later yet. And Bob Deering had a great deal to do. Bob Deering and your father-in-law, Don, they put in so many hours on that place. Your dad, you have a what do you call it? An equity in that
Yeah.
building.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
A vicarious equity because your dad was down there and he and Bob just worked all the time on it. They had some help, but
I
they
know
they
Renee-
were there all the
I
time.
know Renee came and helped and
Yeah.
supervised and helped, and there was quite a few people, but I know they were there a lot. Yeah.
Well, there were quite a few, but none of them worked to the extent of your father. Your father-in-law and Bob Deering, and Renee also worked on that. And but that time that took considerably more money, and a good deal more of the work was carved out. So anyway, it has been quite remarkable to see the thing grow and to see how it has. The up there in the corner is this little barrel-y like thing
Oh, I've seen
that
it.
held some masks and stethoscopes and things. That's what I think the state or anyway some thing gave it to the first EMTs here. That's what Renee and Delane had out in their pump house
Yeah.
for many years, and that was all we had.
Yeah, there's a great picture I've seen of the two of them with jumpsuits on, and they have
That's
this
right.
little barrel of things.
And then Renee and Bob went around to the sheriff's department and bummed the first vehicle we had, the Black Mariah. It was a black, what kind of a car was that? It had been in a shootout in Miracle Valley and still had the bullet holes in it.
Oh,
And I was sorry that we didn't keep that as kind of a relic,
yeah.
but
They use that to go to like an ambulance, sort of?
we,
or-
we couldn't load people into it,
Okay.
but we could put equipment in it.
Yeah.
And so that was good because we could get oxygen tanks and a lot of stuff that we didn't have room before. Now we still sometimes wound up I remember one time we went to a call over in New Mexico, and our fire vehicle broke down, and Renee's truck happened to be in the area. I think it was Renee's truck. Anyway, we all piled into that with our equipment, and when we got there, we left some of it in the pickup. Well, when we came back out, the horses were munching away on some of our stuff. So it is kind of different around here. They talk about a golden hour. Well, sometimes it would take an hour to get to a place on the bad roads, but it was all interesting, and we got the fire department after the EMTs had been going for a while, and that was a good addition, which also had lowered the taxes because being close to an insurance,
Yeah.
being close to a fire department is a help on your insurance.
Yeah.
So even though it is still voluntary, we do not charge a membership in the outfit. It runs on donations, and therefore people ought to think about that they're saving money on their house insurance, not to mention that their house may be rescued
Right.
because we have the department here. And another thing, you were asking about social life here early on. There wasn't anything for the men to do, except most of them were kind of lone wolfy types. They were interested in, well, birds, nearly all of them at that time. But they didn't, and Dr. Vosser's bought his house. He was he was wild about Sal Puget's, the sun children. They're a very ugly kind of thing. And Dr. Gertch, a very renowned spider man. And so they were interested in things like that, and vents and tarantulas and also spiders, and the research station, of course, came into being in, I think, 1956. And so there have always been retiring people or people who loved it here and hoped to retire here one day, buying around here. But many were not here at the time, or not here very often. And so, but there wasn't any organization for the men. Well, in a way, the EMTs and firefighters have supplied a kind of thing that, of course, there are men and women, but it is something the men unite in doing. And also, that is why the forum, one reason I did begin the forums way back, and one reason was that the women they've had so what. There was a homemakers group here as early as 1919, maybe even a little earlier, and the women in different groups had always gotten together for a lunch, something. There were different bunches of them, but they already were doing that in the 19, like 19, 14, 15, 16. But the guys were just not real gregarious, and so we did begin the forums as something that'd be nice for the community, but also it would be something the men could come to, and they do, and that's good. But a pretty, Eric Hayes said to me, the women would come to So What once a month, and they would bring the children. And he said that was when the kids played together. that they didn't go around visiting from house to house playing then. The children didn't back then. That would be 60 years ago.
Yeah.
They pretty much stayed on their home place,
Oh,
except for these Women's Day out.
yeah.
So I would say that back earlier, social life was more limited to, there weren't that many people in the first place,
Right.
and in the second place, uh, people just didn't socialize as much then. And though we did have so what with the potlucks, and the soup kitchens didn't begin until after Portal Rescue, so the busy, clubby stuff has not been. I remember the sewing group began in the library with actual quilting. People were quilting. There were 5 or 6 people, and I went with the thought that it would be relaxing. And what I found was that the very muscles that were got when I was typing were got when I was trying to quilt. So I gave that up real quick. But the sewing group has suffered, or no, has had it almost stopped. It was down to just a few people, and now it's booming again.
Yeah.
And I guess they sometimes have 20
Yeah.
people, and they don't even pretend to sew anymore. A lot of them don't. So that is another group that has gotten going, and the writing group didn't exist when I came, or we've had a reading group. It wasn't in existence when we first came, but it wasn't too long till we did have a reading group that meant, I think every couple of weeks. And it was well attended. We had 25, quite a few people, and that was fun. And it went on for quite a while, and then it kind of fell apart. And so the reading group has come and gone, and the hiking group has hung in there since probably about 83, maybe a little earlier.
Jeannie, can you say more about the forum and what the initial idea was of what was the purpose for the forum?
Well, we don't need more programs now, but back then, remember, there wasn't anything.
Right.
And there are so many interesting things around here. And so one thing too that we did beginning very pretty early was we would have on election years we would have candidates nights, and we would have that, and then another forum would be studying the propositions or anything that would be up for vote on the ballot. So we would have 2 to 3 political programs in election years, and those certainly did serve a valuable thing for a good while, and may again. And things of community interest, but no, I have always enjoyed that. In Tucson, they had what they called, I think, the Friday night forums that were founded a long, long time ago when Tucson had less than 40,000 people. And so I don't quite know where the idea came from, but we did decide to do it, and I did instigate it, but we didn't. I don't think that we had them every month to begin with. Mm-hmm. I don't think we did. Mm-hmm. But one of my motivations was to have something to bring people together under a fairly broad canopy, because we were so scattered and still are so scattered, and a way to create community. And that is something important in a place like this because we are so dependent on each other. And the fire and rescue has the soup kitchen, the Oktoberfest, all these things do help bond rodeo and portal and the Palacios and the Chiricahuas, and all these things are good. They are an interplay, and we understand each other better and cooperate better on issues that we can share.
That kind of leads me to one of the last questions I'm thinking about, which is if instead of looking at the past, if we look to the future, whatever that might be for the Portal area, I wonder, do you have any thoughts or wishes or hopes or things that you would pass on?
Well, one very fervent hope I have is that my home here will be a nature educational center for young people. That is my dream and hope. I do think that urban children, particularly those who do not live where they have much contact with nature and see very little of how wonderful the forest and the wildlife and the birds and things are, that they are missing a great deal, and they're missing their connection to the earth and to living things, and are too tuned into, well, the iPods and the and all that
Technology.
artificial media stuff. And I just think that this is the place now, and I think will increasingly be a place for people to reconnect with nature, to come down at Cave Creek Ranch, for example. There are no TVs, no telephones in the rooms. This is a blessed respite for people who want to get away from being too connected. People can be too connected, too rushed, too crowded. They need time to reflect and be quiet and be tranquil, and they need to enjoy nature and let others enjoy it. And another more practical aspect to having a youth center here is we need and will be having, I think, I hope, more workers in the public parks and nature reserves and national forests. I certainly hope that we get more rather than the present trend down. And because we've got to hang on to these places, they are vanishing or being ruined. And if young people from the cities can come to a place like this and learn the gifts and the beauty and why it is important to protect it, then they may make careers in that. And one of the great crying needs that I have heard is that they need more diverse people serving in the parks and in the forest. Someone who, as one kid put it, looks like me. We need more diverse people, and I hope that Portal can be a gateway to that kind of an appreciation of the wonderful things we do have here, and it spread that love out over the rest of the world.